Just me and my guitar.
Hey, what's going on guys? Mark back in the workshop, or Mark's Aquatics. Welcome back to another episode. And on this little episode we've got some white cloud mountain minnows in the tank, in that little moss scape that we've been putting together over the last couple of weeks. Now the system's fully cycled. It was fully cycled media in there before. We took the water out and put all this new media in and everything else, so all the filters and everything was cycled. It's been going now for a while, and I've done the tests and everything's up to speed. We have really low nitrate in there, and so I've just been up to the fish shop and I bought 5 of these little white cloud mountain minnows. Now these are fantastic little fish and so underrated, I think. You know, over the years they've been known as the poor man's tetras and all these things, but I've always had a soft spot for them because of their colour, and that you don't really need a heater in your house at all, because they will withstand temperatures right down to 5 degrees. And a lot of these little facts that people don't really know about, but I think they're wonderful little characters, super easy to breed. They're egg scatterers. The males and females will get together, obviously, scatter the eggs all over the moss, and within a few hours or maybe a day or so they will hatch into little free swimming larvae, little fry, sorry, and you'll see them buzzing around in amongst the mosses and your plants, and you can get up a good population of these quite quickly if you treat them correctly and you get the right water parameters. They're easy to keep, but it doesn't mean that you just chuck them in. I mean, I've known a lot of people say, oh yeah, just bung a couple of these in to cycle your tank, which is totally out of order. And when you've got ammonia in your tanks, there's nothing worse than you add something in there and it's going to burn their gills, skin, and it's a horrible thing to have to go through. And I wouldn't recommend that you do that at all. Always do a fishless cycle like we're doing with the bench tank. Either use something dead or put some fish food in there. Something just flew past there. I was wondering what that was. I tell you what, we do get a couple of little leeches have come out of the moss and the ground, which I've noticed. I'll fish him out later on. Yeah, these are a magnificent little fish. They really are. I mean, if you're going to start to keep aquariums and go for some small fish first, you won't beat this. I mean, you could replicate what I've done here, where you could go out and make this tank. This tank is still great. You can see all the fronds are coming off of this moss, and it's grown, I would say, a couple of centimeters since we've had it in there. It's growing a bit more leggy than it would have done outside, but when it gets a little bit longer, I'm going to trim it all back, and that's going to encourage that sideways growth, and it should thicken it up. But the good thing is it is growing and it's not dying back, which is fantastic. Yeah, these little guys originate from China, and believe it or not, they were nearly extinct up in the White Cloud Mountain, where they were originally discovered by a Boy Scout leader. And believe it or not, yeah, they were thought to have been extinct, and through to pollution and tourism and stuff like that, they were nearly wiped out. But obviously they've been taken in now. All the ones that we get now are all bred in fish farms. There was one pocket of these guys found. It wasn't on the White Cloud Mountain itself. It was quite a bit far away from there, and Hainan Island, well away from White Cloud Mountain. That's where they were discovered again. So they got a small population there of wild fish, but they've been interbred now over so many years. They've got deformities on them. They've got weak immune systems and stuff like that. So they're not as all with farm things, they tend to mess around with these little guys a bit too much sometimes. Now you can tell the males and the females apart. It's very close, but normally the male has brighter colours on the body, and they're slightly slimmer, and the dorsal fins are sort of wide and fan shaped, where those of the female are triangular and wedge shaped. And obviously and the females have got a whiter distended abdomen on them as well, which you can slightly, it's only very slight. It is quite hard, and they don't stand still for 5 minutes, so it does take a a keen eye to get on there and find out who's who, but you can normally see them displaying to each other, and that sort of gives it away as well sometimes. Yeah, like I was saying just before, they're an amazing first time fish, they really are. And for the colours that they've got, the displays that they do, and I think they're just fantastic little characters. Look at them playing away there, and all happy to be in that little bit warmer water than they were probably up in the shop. And I just think they're fantastic, I really do. And I say for breeding purposes as well, like I said, they're egg scatterers. They're going to scatter eggs all over the place once they get established and they get to know their little environment they're in. And you'll have some little baby ones as well, and it's going to be very simple. They're like, you know, it's like guppies. You put a guppy in there, you've only got to buy one female, and you can guarantee if she's of a certain age, she's going to be full up with little babies ready to give birth in a couple of weeks time. And you can start off with one and end up with no end of them by the end of the year. It's a simple thing to do. Just put one in the tank, look after them, and they'll do you proud, they will. Like I said, they're so active, these little guys. They just make me laugh watching them. Come out here in the workshop now, and it's nice to see them in the morning. They've been in here for about 3 days, or maybe 2 days. But they're settled in nice, they're feeding, whizzing around. There's little tiny worms and micro worms coming out of the soil, which I can see them darting after. And they love going up into the power head, because obviously they're from streams in China, so they love going into that high flow which is coming out of the power head on the return pump, and swimming flat out into that and having a right little play. Now when you do buy these guys, make sure you get at least a minimum of 5, okay, because they are schooling fish, very active, very social, and they do like little tank mates. If you buy just one, you know, if you're going to think about a mixed community tank or anything like that, you're going to find out it's going to end up being really shy, hiding away. They bring each other out of their shells within the shoal. They interact so much, and if you put one on its own, it's just going to it'll probably end up getting depressed, and it'll have no one to play with of its own type. So it's always good to put at least minimum of 5, I would say, from 5 to anywhere up from there, and have a lovely little shoal in a tank. And what I love about this, like I said, it's cold water, so you can have it in your house, or if you're a student and you want a nice little tank, you can go and you can buy a nice cheap tank from somewhere. You haven't got a heater to run, all you want is a nice little pump in there, rear filtration system like this tank's got, and or a little air sponge filter hidden in the back somewhere, and you can have a really cheap running lovely little tank. You can come home and crash out after your studies or whatever, or if you're a youngster, you can come home from school and watch your little fish swimming around. So it really is a minimal outlay for a setup for this. If you do it this way with the garden moss, you can follow the video along to how I made this and set this tank up, and you can go from there, or you can have a completely different setup. It's entirely up to you guys how you want to set your tank up. You can have live plants, fake plants, obviously you know, bogwood in there, or you can just do a mountain minnow setup, which is just pebbles, bit more higher flow, and just put some pebbles in there and the odd bit of moss or something, and let the moss creep over the rocks. That's more of a natural habitat for them, because obviously rivers don't harbour a lot of plants in running water. They get some, but normally it's little pockets of gravel and pebbles and things where they've been rolled around. As you get big surges of water coming down these streams, it rolls everything and moves everything around. So that's the sort of habitat they like to live in. But they seem very happy in there. They got the rocks in there, they got a nice flow, lots of moss to scatter their eggs in. You can see them there going down in the right hand side there. That's what they do. They'll encourage one of them, the male will encourage the female down into an area where he wants to breed, and then they'll go into that area. She'll release the eggs, he'll release the sperm together in a little cloud, which you probably wouldn't even see, it'd be that small with these fish. And then the little fertile eggs will just float and stick to the moss. You can put a spawning mop in there as well for them, if you've just got pebbles, which you can make out of some wool. Make sure it's obviously clean wool or something like that. You can make a little mop and put that and hang that in there with a bit of string, and they'll actually lay the eggs on that. You can see them going in there, shaking their little fins around, doing the little dance. And they've only been in here for a couple of days. Look at that, magic stuff. They're getting on like a house on fire. Lovely to see. Very highly, it's a highly underrated fish. It really is. I think they're fantastic. Poor man's neons, they were called years and years back. But for their coloration and what they get up to in that tank, I prefer them to neons, to be honest. A little bit of bickering going on over there as well. But they're amazing little fish to watch. Yeah, your water hardness for these little guys should be between 5 to 19, and your pH level should range between about 6.0 to 8. So they've got quite a broad range of pH there that they can withstand. Like I say, they're very hardy little guys. But make sure as well, another thing with these is they feed a lot on the surface in the wild, and they like to feed on little midges and things like that, which land obviously on the surface of the water. So I would recommend you put a lid on your tank, or at least a drip tray or something like that, because they do jump out the tank when they see something land on the surface, or they have a little bit of a spook or a bit of a fight between each other. They can break the surface and end up flying out the tank and ended up on the floor, which we don't want. So make sure you get a lid on those little tanks if you decide to get some of these little guys, and you can keep them nice and safe then. And another good thing about these little fish is they're not cannibalistic towards their fry either. So once those eggs have been laid and they've hatched, and you get the swimming fry, they're swimming around the place. One thing I will say, with my tank here, I've got a rear filtration system which goes down into the back into a little series of weirs where my media, bio balls and all that kind of stuff and the sponges are. So you'd have to put some filter floss right tight against it, or a piece of sponge tightly against it if you've got a rear filtration system, or the little fellas are going to get sucked into there and you're going to end up losing them into the filter system then, okay? And then if they end up getting their way to the pump, then it's going to be good night for them. So we need to be careful when we're breeding them that we've got a rear or sponge pushed against that little grid. I'll just raise it up and I'll show you what I mean by that. That little grid there, you see? That's the one we've got to watch so they don't go straight into there. We're going to put a nice bit of sponge on the inside of there and make sure it's pushed hard against. So you've got to keep an eye on it, obviously, because it'll get blocked up over time. But with a tank like this, it's minimal food you're putting in there, and they'll take a wide variety of flake, pellets, things like that nature. Now with a tank like this one, you've got to be obviously really careful, because pellets and things are going to fall in amongst the plants and they're not going to be able to get it. So I tend to feed very, very light flake and break it up, powder it up in my fingers and just put a little bit in so it stays up in the water column, and they can take it out the water column very easy. And just put it in a little tiny bit at a time, so you can see that they've eaten that bit, and then you can add a bit more in. Don't just throw a big heap of it in, or it'll get swirled around in there, and you'll end up with a bit more nitrate build up over time then with the decaying food in your tank. So feed them really sparingly, and don't forget you can feed them live food as well. Go down to your local aquatic shop, you can feed them on Daphnia, brine shrimp, anything along those natures, little copepods, and they'll readily take those. Bloodworms as well are another good one, because a bloodworm in this tank, if you put it in there and it goes into the bottom and you lose live food, it's going to stay alive. That's the good thing. So bloodworms will wriggle into that substrate, and if they do apparently hatch as a mosquito, then they're going to get tagged and nailed on the way out when they hit the surface. If you've got a lid on your tank, then there's nowhere for them to go. So but that's another reason why people put these in ponds as well. It's to keep the mosquito larvae down. If you haven't got goldfish will do a pretty good job, young goldfish, and well, goldfish in general will. They'll see a mosquito larvae buzzing about in there and they'll go for it. But these little guys are super quick, and from the time those little mosquito eggs hatch, they'll be cleaning them up. So if you've got an outside pond, or you've got a heated pond, you could chuck about 10 or 20 of these little guys in there, and they're going to get rid of mosquito larvae in no time. But obviously you're going to have to watch out if you've got a filter system which is going to, without a guard on, and it's going to suck them in, so you've got to be careful on that. My koi pond, but I've got a massive Nexus filter running on the system, and it's got a big mushroom bottom drain with a 4-inch pipe on there, so the poor little guys would end up getting sucked straight into the filter in a matter of hours. So, and it's the first place they'd go to hide, because there's nowhere else to hide, is under that mushroom. So doing that, they'll feel that flow and they'll swim straight in there. So I can't really put any in the pond, which is a bit sad. So there you go, I've got them in my workshop instead. Now, a couple of you on the last video, I noticed you're all commenting well on the JBL test kit giveaway at 2,000 subs. Now, I noticed a couple of you have said, oh, you haven't got a marine tank. But if you listen on the video, I'll just remind you again that every single test in both of those test kits, they're exactly the same. The only two tests that are different, okay, are the magnesium test kit and the calcium test kit, which you test for obviously for coral growth and water stability and everything else in a marine system. But they're the only two tests out of the marine kit that you can't use on your fresh water, okay? But all the rest are exactly the same, and you can use them for your nitrate, nitrite, ammonia, silicate tests, phosphate tests, oxygen tests, iron tests. What else was in there? Oh, I can't remember now, but I think that was the majority. But there's a heap of tests in there that you can do, and so don't be put off by leaving a comment. If you've just got a marine tank, have a go, because it's going to obviously benefit you if you've got a marine tank. But if you've got a freshwater system, those are the only two tests that you can't use. Everything else in those test kits is exactly the same, apart from those two, okay? Right guys, what I thought I'd do while you're here, I thought I'd feed these, and I'll show you how I feed them, okay? So I'm going to do now is I get a little bit of flake food, just a tiny little bit. And just scrunch it up in your fingers. And get it up into like really, really small bits. And then just pop it in there like that. Now I only use a minute amount, because so many people overfeed their fish. It's unreal. And then what I'll do is I'll just open the top, put that there, lift the lid up, suck up a little bit of water out of their tank. Turn the whole thing round and drip it in there, and let that have a little soak around for a second. And then just suck it all up again. We can turn this little baster over and just see it coming in there, and just blow little tiny bits out, you see. You see a few little particles now. Swimming about in there. Put a few more bits in. We got a little tiny bit left on the spoon there, so I'll just I'll pop that that in for them. And you'll just see those little bits now buzzing around, and they'll go in there and they'll hoover the rest of that up. But that's all they need. They don't need much. A couple of times a day. Chasing that food around is fantastic watching them. I think so many people these days, they get aquariums and they try and bung so much into them. Concentrating on one species in one tank's fantastic to watch their behaviour, their natural behaviour, how they go about things in the wild when they've got peace and quiet and they can get on with things without being harassed by other species in the tank. And I really do like to watch single species tanks, and I've had lots of different tanks over the years and bred lots of different species of fish. I used to breed clownfish. Absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. In the workshop where we are here, I had about 10, I had a bank of 12 tanks all the way through, and I had saddled clowns, I had maroon clowns, common pacula clowns, the black and white clowns, all different types, and just the common ocellaris, sorry, that was a mouthful, the ocellaris clowns as well. I used to breed those, but that was fantastic, just getting into those, putting their little slates in their tank up against the side and watching them going in there, laying the eggs, fertilising the eggs, and then a couple of days before they hatch, take them out of that tank, put them in a top tank which is all ready for them when they hatch, and then breeding the rotifers, feeding them the live food and bringing them on, and then having 200 to 300 baby little clownfish all in a little vortex. They all try and hide in the tank. It's amazing to watch them. If you look up baby clownfish, you'll see they move like one organism. They just turn in on each other like they would do, like a big ball of sprats would do in the wild, or sardines, each one having its turn in the middle before it has to go back on the outside again where the predators could pick them off. So they stick together like in a big ball. It's amazing to watch it. And they used to do that when you used to come into to feed things in the morning, or the lights used to come on, and they used to do this little tiny ball up effect, and it was amazing to watch it. Anyway, getting back to these little chaps, there's quite a few different colorations that you can get now. You can buy the albino ones, there's silver tip one, I think there's a couple of different, there's about 3 or 4 species I think, which they've obviously man's created over time into breeding different strains and coming up with these different colours. But these are more of a wild coloration, which I like. I like the wild natural coloration in fish. It's blowing an absolute hoolie here at the moment in Wales. We've got some storms forecast, flooding warnings, all that lot going on. So if I keep stopping, it's because big gusts of wind keep flying over the top of the house, and I'm expecting tiles to fly off. Well, there you go. I didn't clean out the filter at the back. I left all the media as it was in the back there, and there's this monstrous leopard ramshorn snail there which has come out of the back, crawled over the top back into the tank, and he's scoffing all the algae off the bottom of the grid there, you see, on the left hand side. He's doing a fine job of cleaning that up. And the temperature in this tank, I would have thought, well, I'll have a look now. I've got my little gauge and we'll check the temperature out. There you go, that's 15 degrees in there. That, which is the shed temperature. The outside temperature at the moment is 15 degrees in here. So it's just mimicking its surrounding temperature, the tank. And that little ramshorn snail there, he's buzzing about, scoffing all that algae. So that's good. He's surviving. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a couple of days, let things settle in, and I think I'm going to maybe put a couple of these the shrimp that I've got, because I've got some of the shrimp in another little tank in the shrimp room there, which is unheated, which is around 17 to 18 degrees. So what I might do is I might bring them out here and pop them into this tank and see how they go. I know shrimp can take lower temperatures. They might not breed, but I know they can go down low. I mean, I've had a few in the mini pond, and they were quite quite happy. And I mean, I'm not sure. I'll have to get in there again and have another look to see if there's any more in there actually, because if there is a couple more in there, I can take them out and put them into this, and then we'll have a little bit of a cleanup crew in there as well, which will be brilliant. Really excited about this tank so far, guys, the way it's turned out and the way things are growing. Going to put a little bit of liquid CO2 in there just to perk things up if it needs a bit of food. No other signs of die off anywhere else on the tank, and everything's looking green and healthy. Anyway guys, I hope you like that little White Cloud Mountain Minnow update. Well, not an update, the new one of the new tank mates. And I hope it gives you some inspiration to go out there and set one of these little tanks up yourself, because it's absolutely super cheap to set up. No heater, just a little cycled filter you want, and some stuff from nature as it were there, and you're away and you've created yourself a lovely little thing to look at in the evenings and something to look after at minimal cost. Anyway guys, as always, you're all stars, love you loads, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you all on the next edition of Mark's Aquatics. Take care, bye for now.
Just me and my guitar.